Hello and welcome back to Flow. I hope you have enjoyed the Flow series presentations. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into ketosis, which is the rocket fuel for our mind and our bodies. Let's get into this. So in today's lesson, we're going to be talking about the 80-20 of ketosis, and especially ketosis for focus and productivity. Remember, health is a side effect of this. Our main focus is to get more focus. And please note, I am not a doctor. If you have an underlying health condition, always check with a good doctor before you start any health regimens. This program is not medical advice. Always consult your physician, and please do your own due diligence. With that being said, we're going to be covering a lot of information today. And I have a confession to make. Biology is actually one of my weakest subjects. In fact, I remember in high school biology, I barely passed the class. I think I got a D in that class. So I barely passed the class. It's not a big forte of mine. And it has now come to haunt me in my later lives. I guess I shouldn't say haunt me, but it has come to bless me in my later lives so I can teach the stuff to everybody. So biology is not a big forte of mine. Even today, to really wrap my head around this stuff, I really had to reread and study these concepts like multiple times, right? So I had to go over the same paragraph multiple times to really drill this into my head. So it's not a big forte of mine. But what I think my forte lies is in taking these big complex concepts and then to drill it down to its essentials and to present it in a way that's easy to follow. And so that's what I'm trying to do throughout this lesson, is to take these biological concepts and to really make it in an easy to follow way so that people can really understand this. And people can actually understand the underlying mechanisms behind everything that goes on inside ketosis and everything else that we're going to cover today. So I hope that you can get a lot out of this, and I hope you can really wrap your head around this, because I'm trying to really simplify it for you here. And of course, if you want to take action right away without all the knowledge behind it, you can actually skip ahead to the action items. But I do suggest that you do go over some of these concepts, okay? Because essentially, you don't really have to know how the engine works to use the engine, right? But if there's a problem with the engine down the line, if you have a question about ketosis, or if keto is not working for you, then if you have gone over these concepts, you will have known how the engine works so you can fix the engine to get it to working again. Whereas if you don't know how the engine works, then you will have no idea on how to fix yourself, right? So I do urge you to really go over this lesson, even though it might be long, okay? But of course, if you really just want to take action right away, you can also do that as well. So you can skip over to the action items. All right. So here are the lesson items for today. We are again going to cover a lot of things today. So let's get into this right away. Let's talk about the main objectives for this lesson and for ketosis. So the main objectives, our main goal for ketosis is fat adaptation. We want your body to get used to using fat for your main fuel source. That is the main goal. And for fat adaptation to happen, it takes usually around 6 to 8 weeks, and it differs by person to person. But normally it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And we really have to be patient with this, because changes in our biology actually takes quite a bit of time. And so the longer term goal is metabolic flexibility, which means we can easily switch from using glucose as our main fuel source to using fat as our main fuel source whenever we please. So it's like being in and out of ketosis whenever we please. It's like the ultimate nutritional dance. And it is like the ultimate body hack that we can do to ourselves, this metabolic flexibility. And I can give you an example. So most of us, our whole lives, we've been running on glucose. And glucose can be seen as a very slow type of energy. It is definitely powerful. It can definitely carry a lot of weight, but it is a slower, less efficient type of energy. But when we get keto adapted or fat adapted, we have a faster, more efficient type of energy. We can really speed our energy metabolism up quite a bit by being in fat burning mode. So what metabolic flexibility allows us to do is to be able to switch between the slower type of energy such as glucose, to using fat for our fuels. So we can really switch between the different vehicles here, right? Sometimes we might need faster energy. Sometimes we might be working on a big focus project that requires a lot of focus, and we can do that by being in ketosis. Whereas other times we might not really need that faster energy. Sometimes we might be on vacation or something and we might not need that. So we can switch between the two vehicles here. And glucose, at times, it can be, just sometimes, can be a little bit better than being in ketosis, especially if we are trying to gain weight or like to bulk up or to gain muscle or anything like that, right? So the two do have its own places, and it's like very situational, right? But most of the times we want to be in this little vehicle here, right? This little faster energy type of fuel source. All right, and our ancestors were probably metabolically flexible by necessity. They would have lots of energy, they would have lots of food some days, and other foods they would have days where they would have absolutely no food. And this flexibility allowed humans to go days without eating and to feel absolutely fine, right? Because we were both using glucose and fat as fuel. We were switching between the two vehicles as we pleased. But today, we have such an abundance of food now that we don't really switch vehicles anymore. We only stick to that one big, large truck, and it can be slowing us down, especially in our mental functions. All right, so let's take a look at some history behind fats and behind ketosis. So here's a little history lesson. All right, the ketogenic diet started as a treatment for epilepsy patients. And it actually started in the 1920s, so ketosis is not a new thing at all. And in the 1920s, they had noticed that fasting seemed to have some amazing anti-seizure properties. Because when fasting, the body created ketone bodies, such as acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone, which came from metabolizing fat. And so they thought of a diet that was very high in fat and low in carbs to simulate the effects of fasting by forcing the body to use fat as its primary fuel source. And this was known as the ketogenic diet, or other names for this can be called fasting mimicking diet, or another alternative terminology for this type of diet is called the modified Atkins diet. Because the original idea behind this whole thing was to mimic that fasting so that they can really help the epilepsy patients. And the name ketosis comes from ketones, or ketone bodies. This is when the liver turns fat into ketone bodies. And as I explained before, the three main ketone bodies are acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. And here are how they look like. So because fasting had great benefits to seizures, they wanted to see what would happen to these epilepsy patients if they used this type of diet. So they had them go on a very, very strict ketogenic diet for 1 year, and it led to improvements in 44% of the participants, and 12% actually became seizure-free. And you can see how powerful this type of diet is for our mind, especially for our mind. It also is powerful for the brain, the body, but especially for the mind, it is amazingly powerful. So it seemed that the ketogenic diet helps with cognitive function. And the ketogenic diet, it kind of got lost for a while, but it made its resurgence with many pioneer doctors and scientists leading new science behind health and neurology. And now there are a ton of resources behind ketosis and backing up the great benefits that ketosis has with modern day technology and science. So let's talk about the history of fat. Is fat bad for us? And how did this happen? How did we get to believe and get other people to believe that fat is bad for us? So it all started with this man right here named Ancel Keys, and he is actually quite infamous in the keto community because he had made a very misleading claim that fat is bad for us, right? And he popularized this idea, this belief that fat is supposed to be bad for us. So this is Ancel Keys, and he started a research. So this all started with the research. And the research was that it seeked to link coronary heart disease and to make a connection in dietary patterns between about 6 or 7 countries. And the 6 or 7 countries were USA, Canada, Australia, England and Wales, Italy, and Japan. And when he plotted the data and made the connection with heart attacks and fat consumption, there seemed to be a big correlation. And the overall conclusion was actually very simple. Countries that ate more fat had more heart attacks. And it looked something like this. And just by looking at this, yeah, you can draw some conclusions here, right? You can actually draw a straight line. The more fat you eat, the more coronary heart disease you can get. And the hypothesis was if you eat more fat, you get fat. Your cholesterol rises, your arteries get clogged, and results in a heart attack. You know, the things that we all have been taught probably as we were growing up, right? And this hypothesis was actually accepted by many health associations such as the USDA, American Medical Association, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association. And you can also find them in our food pyramids that we have accepted today. So as you can see, it says to use fat and oils very sparingly, right? So the anti-fat and anti-cholesterol movement took off. But the thing is this, there weren't only 6 or 7 countries in the study, in this research. There were actually 22 countries in this study. And it's harder to make a correlation when you factor in the rest of the countries. And Ansel Keys, as it turns out, he intentionally left out some critical pieces. And people are drawing conclusions now that are saying that he intentionally left these pieces of information out because he was incentivized by some corporations. And so he left out the countries where people eat a lot of fat but have little heart disease, such as Holland and Norway. Countries where fat consumption is low but the rate of heart disease is high, such as Chile. And where high consumption of saturated fat but low cardiovascular disease or vascular deaths occur, such as France. And this is called the French paradox, because French people, they seem to consume a ton of saturated fat, such as olive oil, but they have very low cardiovascular disease. And so this man by Dr. George Mann actually conducted another research. So he was actually supposed to back up the research by Ansel Keys. But then he did a similar study, and he was supposed to find evidence to support this hypothesis, right? But he came to the conclusion that dietary fat is not the determinant of either cholesteremia or coronary heart disease. The diet heart hypothesis is the greatest scam ever perpetrated on the American public. So in a study that was supposed to back up the studies of Ansel Keys, because he was not susceptible to incentives and everything like that, and because he wanted to reveal the truth pretty much, he made a bold claim that the diet heart hypothesis is the greatest scam ever perpetrated on the American public. And so it was a very bold claim, and this hypothesis was never really proven true. Okay, and this is what Dr. George Mann says. To test the Heart Association premise, seeking people who consumed high cholesterol, high animal fat diets, we finally turned to the Messiah. They are East African tribesmen who subsist almost solely on their cattle, consuming meat, blood, and milk. Mann studied 1,500 Messiah, he says, and found they have very low levels of cholesterol in their blood, half as much as we do, and very rarely have cardiovascular disease. So even though these people, they consume a lot of fat, they have very low cardiovascular disease. And there are many studies that are showing that saturated fat, the less saturated fat we eat, the more heart disease that we get. It's the other way around. And the more saturated fat you eat, the less heart disease that you get. And not only in males, but also in females. And this was in Europe. So in 1977, despite all of this other scientific studies, the George McGovern Committee, they set the first dietary goals for the United States to reverse the heart disease epidemic. Even though it received criticism, some who insisted it was sugar and not fat to blame, it was accepted by the USDA. And so the basics of the guideline was this. Eat less fat and cholesterol, eat less refined and processed sugars, eat more complex carbs from veggies, fruits, and grains, a low-fat, high-carb diet for everyone. That's pretty much what the guideline is, right? A low-fat, high-carb diet for everyone, without really thinking about individuality. And thus, the food pyramid was born. The food pyramid that we are all familiar with today. And the food pyramid that we were all taught throughout school, right? And so, what happened after these low-fat guidelines took place? Well, obesity trended upwards and upwards. And people seemed to get more overweight and more obese, and more consumption of sugar seemed to occur. And even hospitalizations of heart disease seemed to go up after these guidelines had been set. And so it's really asking this data, did it really work? Did these guidelines, these low-fat guidelines really worked for the general public? I'm not quite sure. And if you want to check out a great video on this, you can check out The Story of Fat, Why We Were Wrong About Health. But you don't really have to. I mean, I'm going over most of the information throughout this lesson anyways. So maybe fat isn't the real culprit, right? Maybe it was sugar that was to blame for all of this. So let's move on to the next part of the lesson, which is food is the ultimate drug. So let's define what is a drug. So the dictionary defines this as drug, noun, a medicine or other substance which has a physiological effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. What is food? Food, noun, any nutritious substance that people or animals eat or drink or that plants absorb in order to maintain life and growth. So here's the thing. Food is the ultimate drug. Food can be the ultimate drug. We are ingesting substances every day that has a physiological effect on our bodies. Whatever we take in, our body reacts to that type of food. Food can either become a drug or it can become medicine. And so let's talk about the importance of food. And so this is by Dr. Mark Hyman. He says that food is not just calories, it is information. It tells our genes what to do. Food is information. It's telling our bodies what to do. And this is a great book, The Ultra Mind Solution, a simple way to defeat depression, overcome anxiety, and sharpen your mind. And I read this many, many years ago. And this book was actually one of the big reasons why I started to eat a lot more healthy. And this book really convinced me that food is not just for our bodies, food is also for the mind. By fixing our bodies, we can actually fix our minds. And because I was so convinced of this, I started to apply this into my life. And long time ago, many years ago, probably a decade plus now, I used to be really depressed. I used to have so much anxiety in my life. But just by switching up my food intake and doing exercise as well, it really got me out of that big black hole. And it really got me onto the positive sides of life. And I really credit food and also this book for transforming my life around, because it really did help me out during those low times. It really did help me to overcome any of those mental problems that I had in the past. So that is the importance of food. And this is a great book. If you have some time, then I would recommend this book to you, The Ultra Mind Solution. And this is Mark Hyman. And I give him a lot of credit for me even teaching you this stuff, because I'm just passing the torch to you now, right? I'm just a messenger. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. So Dr. Mark Hyman, what he described himself as, he became the accidental psychiatrist because he was treating all these patients who had all these mental problems by altering the food that they eat. And so we talked about the flow hierarchy, right? So at the very bottom and base level is our biology, right? And food is our biology. Whatever we eat, it can transform our biology in a good way or a bad way. So we really are diving into the foundations of flow here. And so this is a big misnomer. 1 calorie is not equal to another calorie. Calorie in does not equal calories out. That's just way too simplifying this thing, all right? That's seeing it from the perspective of thermodynamics, where like one of the laws of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be destroyed or created, it can only be transferred, right? But in terms of food, it doesn't go as simply as that. In terms of calorie, it doesn't go as simply as that. Because in terms of weight, yeah, I guess it makes sense. 1 calorie equals another calorie. But in terms of health, it really doesn't make sense. Because if you compare like just these two meals, like a meal from McDonald's, even though it might have the same calories, has the same benefits or the same advantages and disadvantages as a healthier salmon meal. I mean, it really does not make any sense, right? How can a bag of fries be equivalent in health to a salmon meal? I mean, it just doesn't really make sense, to a healthier, like high-fat omega-3 salmon meal. So we really have to look past this calorie in, calorie out model, because the calories in, calories out weight loss model has devolved into a nutritional dinosaur, because while calories matter, hormones count even more. Food is information, not a math equation. So let's take a look at the correlation of food and the brain. Food actually can have an impact on depression, mood, anxiety, brain fog, autism, and ADHD. And some of these I have personally encountered in the past, or I was going to say past life. It kind of seems like a past life because I'm a completely different person now. But in the past, I have definitely had struggles with some of these mental problems. And so we have to look at it this way. Garbage in equals garbage out. And we really want to look at it from a perspective of prevention. Prevention is different from treatment. Treatment is something that happens after the fact, right? Treatment is something that you say, for example, you have a disease and then you go to the doctor and they will try to treat that disease. But our main goal is to go deeper than that. It's to define what caused that disease in the first place. And if we can prevent that disease from happening in the first place, we don't need a treatment anymore, right? So it's really getting to the root causes of all of this. And so a treatment is like a band-aid, whereas prevention, it's like starting from the roots, looking at it from the roots and following those trails back to where those roots came from. Instead of treating this, how can we prevent this from happening? And I can give you an example from Dr. Stephen Gundry. He's the author of Plant Paradox, which is a great book. It really is an eye-opening book on actually how plants can be bad for us if we take and eat too many plants, because plants have these poisons called lectin. Because we have to realize that plants are also living things, right? Just like animals are living things, plants also have a defense mechanism and they release these toxins known as lectins. Dr. Gundry, he was a heart surgeon. And I think he did some ridiculous amounts of heart surgeries, thousands of heart surgeries or something like that. And I think one of his patients that he was doing heart surgery on was like this very overweight man. And he did the heart surgery and it went successfully. And then like a few years later, the same person came back in and he was still overweight, right? And he had to get heart surgery again. And so Dr. Stephen Gundry looked at this and he said, what am I doing here? I'm working more on the treatment for this type of disease rather than preventing it from happening in the first place. So he realized this fact and he started to reflect on his life. And it was then that he decided to quit his occupation as a heart surgeon and to get into nutrition, because he really wanted to prevent this thing from happening in the first place. So we really want to look at it from a prevention type of perspective rather than a treatment. So food is our roots, okay? So food is one of those underlying core causes of our entire biology. And I really want to drill this into your head because food is that important, all right? Okay, so because we talked about the importance of food, let's talk about the importance of fat. All right. Our body needs fat. Fat is actually very important. Our bodies are made up of fat. Portions of every part of the body are made of fat. Brain cells and myelin that insulate these cells are made of fat and require plenty of high quality fat to perform at their best. Brain is mostly fat. Our brain is 60% fat, primarily DHA, which are very present in fatty fish. And wouldn't it make sense to feed our brain more of what it's made out of? But again, we have been taught that fat is bad for us, right? So we now enter ketosis, rocket fuel for the mind. So let me give you a brief recap of ketosis and its big benefits. So what is ketosis? Well, when your body is mainly getting its energy through fat and not glucose, that is considered ketosis. And remember, our body usually derives most of its energy from one fuel source at a time, either through glucose or either through fat. And the body usually uses glucose first. If glucose is present, then the body will usually use glucose first. But if the body runs out of glucose, then it turns to fat, right? And glucose are just like the carbs, the pastries, the sugars, and everything else. And also protein falls under this category because inside the body, which we're going to cover in a little bit, the protein converts into glucose. And fats are just the oils and the fats and fatty foods such as butter. And when glucose levels are high in your body, it's busy storing the excess fats. So when you're using glucose as fuel, our body is storing fat. This is known as the absorptive state. And when you are in ketosis or when you fast, glucose levels decrease and triggers the body to enter a post-absorptive state. In this state, you're not storing fat anymore. You are actually burning fat. That is like the main idea behind ketosis. You are burning fat for your fuel. So, how do we track ketosis? Okay, how do we measure this stuff? We can measure it in 3 ways. First is through urine, second is through breath, and third is through blood. And let's cover all of these. So urine, it's not recommended. And this is the least accurate way, but most people resort to this because it is the cheapest, but I really would not recommend this. If you really want to get a grasp of your body and your focus and your flow, then I would recommend other methods, which we will be covering in just a minute here. But urine, it's the cheapest. You can get a lot of these strips for just $7 or $8, something like that. But the second way is through breath. It measures ketone body acetone in your breath, which only accounts for about 2% of blood ketones. So this is the second most accurate way. But the devices for tracking your breath is pretty pricey. It can be from $140 to $239. And there are no strips required. And it's a one-time investment, so you could keep reusing these. And it looks something like this. Here's one from Ketogenic. And you can use this, even though it's not the most accurate, but it is just a one-time investment. You don't need to buy any strips over and over again. But the most accurate and most recommended, and it's actually really, really, really recommended for this program, is to use your blood to track ketosis. Because it measures beta hydroxybutyrate, which accounts for 78 of the total ketones in the blood. And beta hydroxybutyrate is like the main component for mental energy, because BHB can cross the brain-blood barrier. So what do we need to track our blood ketosis, right? So you need a blood measuring device, a lancet device, which usually comes with the device. You need some lancets, ketone strips, blood glucose strips, and some alcohol swabs. And these devices are relatively cheap. So the device price is anywhere from $27 to about $35. And the glucose strips and the ketone strips vary. And the thing with these devices, the device is a one-time investment, but the strips you have to get over and over again. So that's like the main downside. But this is the most accurate way to measure ketones. And these are just brands. So Keto Mojo is a good one. And that's become really popular these days. And this one is $60. And it comes with 10 glucose and 10 ketone strips. And the strips, after you run out of those strips, is about $1 per strip. And glucose strips are very cheap at 36 cents. And it looks something like this. And here's another brand, Abbott Labs Precision Extra. And this is the one that I've been using for many years now. And the Keto Mojo, it wasn't around when I first started keto. And so this was the only one pretty much available. And this one, the device is $27.50, and the ketone strips are $1, and glucose strips are about 40 cents. So it's the similar price, okay? But I think I would recommend Keto Mojo more because it is a little bit more modern, and I heard that it requires less blood than the older Abbott Labs one. But this is OG, right? This is like the original one. And there's a kit that you can get with 30 glucose and 30 ketone strips for about $109. And it looks something like this. And there's another one called Keto BM. It's a kit with 10 ketone strips and it's $34.99. But this only measures ketones and not glucose. So I wouldn't quite recommend this one. So how do we measure this stuff? So tracking ketones in the blood is the recommended way. And you really, really should get one of these blood glucometer devices for the program, because we really want to be accurate here. We really want to know what is working and what is not, especially for our flow hours, right? We really want to get a grasp on our productivity. Okay, so blood glucose. This is also known as blood sugar. It means the amount of glucose inside of our blood. That is what this device is measuring. And the average blood glucose levels in humans ranges from 70 to 130 milligrams per deciliter. And for ketosis, we should aim for about 60 to 90. So it should be relatively low. And here is a little chart to show you this. So I would say anything from 90 and below is a good marker to aim for. Or even lower than that, I would say 80 to 90. And so it looks something like this. So what you do is you insert your blood into the device and it'll give you a readout. And I do have a video on how you can use these devices, so you can check that out after you've seen this lesson. And ketone levels, the amount of ketones in the blood, it's usually measured in millimolars. And here is the famous chart of measuring your ketones. And you don't got to worry about the red marks or the yellow marker or the yellow colored parts of the chart here, ketoacidosis or starvation ketosis, because normally that stuff won't pertain to us unless we have like a health problem. It's really rare that we're going to encounter that. And here's another chart from Keto Mojo. And so ketones require another strip, right? And it'll give you a readout like this. So 4.1 on this chart indicates that we are in post-exercise ketosis. It is the optimal therapeutic zone. And so there's actually a way where we can combine glucose reading with the ketone reading. So it's called the glucose ketone index. Ketone index, aka GKI, is a very accurate way of measuring ketosis. It tracks the ratio of blood glucose to ketones as a single unit of value. So normally, to track ketones, you need to track both blood glucose and ketone levels. Two different strips are required. And when we combine the two, we can get a very accurate number called the GKI. It's a simple way of combining blood glucose and ketone levels. And here is a simple little chart that shows you a great state or a good number to be around with the GKI number readout. So here is a brief overview of the chart of the GKI. And if you are under 1, it is pretty much the highest level of ketosis. And it doesn't really require doctor supervision. As long as you're doing everything else right, it really shouldn't require doctor supervision. Okay, but then 1 to 3 is a high level of ketosis, 3 to 6 a moderate level, and 6 to 9 low level, and above 9 you are probably not in ketosis. And so to measure this, I was actually looking for an app to use, but there really isn't one that is out right now. And so I've included the GKI calculator within the health tracker that you have been using, or that I'm going to be presenting to you. And so I made it very easy. So if you automatically, or I guess not automatically, but if you put in your glucose levels and your ketone levels, it will automatically churn out your GKI number right on the bottom there. So with these readouts, if you have an 80 in your glucose reading and then you have a 1.5 in your ketone reading, then you will have a GKI of about 2.96, right? So right on the 3. So it will be about a high level of ketosis. And you should definitely feel some cognitive benefits if you are in this state. So ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis is not the same thing as ketosis, okay? So you don't got to really worry about that. Ketoacidosis is something that diabetics deal with. It's very rare and it's completely different from ketosis. So ketoacidosis occurs when blood glucose levels are really high and ketone levels are really high. But we want ourselves to be in a high ketone level and low blood glucose levels, right? So we shouldn't really worry about this unless you have a health problem. Don't worry so much about it. Okay, how to get into ketosis. First of all, let's talk about ketogenic diet before we talk about the prolonged fasting method. So ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet in one sentence is simply a high-fat, low-carb diet with moderate protein. That's all we've got to worry about. And the keto diet is not an Atkins diet. Although sometimes it is referred to as the modified Atkins, it's not just a low-carb diet. It is a low-carb plus high-fat. There's a big difference between the two because in Atkins, you are not in ketosis and you don't get the benefits of ketosis. So this is pretty much what the standard American diet kind of looks like, and it's pretty sad, right? And so you have your meals containing mostly of carbs. But what the keto diet requires us to do is to flip this on its head. And we now have most of our meals containing fat, and we need a high percentage of fat in order to be in ketosis. So here are the different types of keto diets, and we will briefly touch base on these. So let's start with the classic keto diet. This was the original diet that was used on epilepsy patients to reduce their seizures. This is extremely high in fat, about 90 to 92%, and extremely low on carbs and also low proteins. The rest are filled with proteins and carbs, but this is actually very, very hard to do. And this is usually used for more treatments rather than a way of life. So the next diet is the standard keto diet, or the modified Atkins diet. And this is actually the one that we are going to be implementing for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So high fat, about 75%, with moderate protein, about 20% with low carb. And we limit our carbs to about 20 to 50 grams per day. We also have a high protein keto diet. It's popular with bodybuilders and weightlifters. We have high fat, moderate protein, and lower carbs. And we also have cyclical keto diet. So we're pretty much doing standard keto for 5 to 6 days. The usual high fat of 75%, moderate protein 20%, low carb 5%. And we also have a carb refeed day, where about once a week we introduce carbs into our diet, where carbs make up 70%, moderate protein about 20 to 25% with low fat. And it's also known as keto cycling, which involves cycling in and out of ketosis. Remember, metabolic flexibility. But carb refeeding, this is also known as carb refeeding. And the idea here is that it is easier for people to stick to the diet because they can take a break and also have carbs, or aka cheat days. And this is an ideal type of situation and lifestyle for us, but for the 6 to 8 weeks, we are going to stick to a standard keto diet. Because when we introduce carbs too early, our body is not fully adapted yet. We really want to adapt our body to using fat first before we get into cyclical keto diet. And so the cyclical keto diet is mainly for athletes who want to maximize fat loss while building muscle. And the next type of keto diet is a targeted keto diet. Standard keto, but timing the carb consumption at a specific time. So we are pretty much consuming 25 to 50 grams of carbs about 60 or 30 to 60 minutes before exercise, because a little bit of carbs can be beneficial to your muscles, or if you're like bulking. But also keto just works fine during a workout too. And also fasting before a workout also has tremendous benefits to your body. So targeted keto diet is for those who want to target their carb intake for exercise performance so they can fuel their muscles with glycogen during exercise. Next diet, and this is a controversial one, is the carnivore diet. And the word carnivore might seem a little bit extreme because you're not really a carnivore, right? But it's essentially an almost zero carb diet, meaning no plants and just mostly all fat and protein. And big advocates of the carnivore diet is Dr. Ken Berry and Jordan Peterson. In fact, Jordan Peterson's daughter, she really credits the carnivore diet for, I think she had a lot of joint pains and muscle pains before going on that diet. But then as she went into the carnivore diet, all of that went away, right? And really changed their life around. So carnivore diet, I guess it's a newer type of keto diet. So there has to be more research done on this. But I mean, it can be a viable option. And I'm actually open-minded to this in the future as well, to see what it does to the body and especially for the brain. So that is the carnivore diet. So flow diet, what will we use on the program, right? So we're going to use a modified version of the cyclical diet, keto diet. But like I said, it's only after we are fat adapted. For the 6 to 8 weeks straight, we have to use the standard keto diet because we have to be fat adapted first. That is our main goal, right? We really want to be fat adapted so that we can get metabolic flexibility. So we will get our bodies fat adapted first, and then we will start implementing the flow diet. And that's when the fun part starts, because we get to have cheat days. And during cheat days, you can have whatever you want. So it's going to get a lot of fun. So we're going to be using this standard keto diet with about 75% of our diet consisting of fat. And okay, so here are just some pitfalls and just some misinformation. So you can't be splitting your meals this way. So for example, you can't be splitting like your carbs and your fats into different meals. So you can't have like all carbs in the morning and then having all fat in the evening. Every meal that you eat should have high fat, low carb, because if you only have carbs for one meal, it will kick you out of ketosis, and we really don't want that to happen. So we really want to ingest high fat for every meal. In fact, everything that we eat should have high fat, except for when we're drinking water and taking our supplements and stuff like that, the obvious stuff. And the keto diet, again, is not Atkins diet, it's not paleo diet, it's not just a low carb diet. And there's going to be a point when we transition from glucose burning to fat burning. And there's going to be a point where we're kind of like in the middle there. We're not really in ketosis, but we're not really we're not really using glucose for our fuel source, right? So we're kind of really in the gray area. And when we're in this gray area, I mean, it is going to feel a little bit bad, and it's going to take some time to adapt your body to using fat. So just a bit of warning there, okay? So if you are starting out on the keto diet, I would recommend trying this when you don't have a high workload in your schedule. Try it when you are less busy because there is going to be a transition phase. So calculating calories. All right, let's get into how we can calculate our fat percentages. So this is a big mistake that I did. I thought that carbs, protein, and fat, they all equal the same amount of calories, right? But that is not the fact. So here are the macronutrient breakdowns. So 1 gram of carbs is about 4 calories. 1 gram of protein is about 4 calories, but fat is actually 9 calories. So let me give you an example of pork belly here. So if you can see pork belly, we can see that it has a total of 53 grams of fat, which makes it perfect for the keto diet. And there are basically no carbs and about 9 grams of protein. So what we have to do is we take these numbers and we multiply it by the amount in calories. So carbs, since there's none, we would usually multiply that by 4, but in this case it's 0. And protein, we multiply 9 by 4, and then we multiply fat by 9. So in this case, carbs are 0, proteins make up 36 calories, and fat makes up 477 calories, with a total calorie of 513. So the percentages look something like this. Protein about 7%, fat about 93%. So pork belly is really, really keto friendly. And honestly, it's like one of the beauties of the keto diet because you can eat delicious foods such as pork belly while still getting in all of the beautiful fat that we need for ketosis. Okay, and to measure this stuff, you can actually use some apps. And the 2 apps that I can recommend is Chronometer and MyFitnessPal. I personally use Chronometer. When I started out, I actually used Chronometer, not so much anymore because I am so fat adapted now. Like I don't really need these apps anymore. But when you're starting out, I would recommend Chronometer to track all of your macronutrients. Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper into the macronutrient breakdown. So let's dive a little bit deeper into carbs. So net carbs versus total carbs. This is a big debate in the keto community. So net carbs is total carbs minus dietary fiber minus sugar alcohols. So carbs minus fiber minus sugar alcohols. So if we can take an example here, this is showing the total carbs, the dietary fiber, and also the sugar alcohol, right? So for this example, the total carbs is 9. But if we want to calculate net carbs, we subtract dietary fiber and we subtract sugar alcohols. So the net carbs in this food is 4 grams. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the different types of fiber that affect the gut very differently. There's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. And there's also the processed fiber. And so for the next 6 to 8 weeks, let's just keep this really, really simple, okay? Pure 80-20. Let's just count total carbs. That's it. Total carbs. Plus it's safer. It gives us a cushion so that we stay in ketosis and we don't get kicked out of ketosis. So let's just count total carbs until we reach fat adaptability, all right? All right, sugar alcohols. So there is a sugar alcohol called erythritol. And so before I cover this, let's go over the glycemic index. What is the glycemic index? It ranges from 1 to 100, and it's measuring how much blood sugar rises after 2 hours of eating. It's also known, which is also known as blood glucose, right? Blood sugar, blood glucose. Foods low on the GI scale tend to release glucose slowly, whereas foods high on the GI scale release glucose rapidly. The steady release of glucose in low glycemic foods help keep blood glucose under control. So pretty much, low GI is good, high GI is bad. And there's also an insulin index. It ranges from a 1 through 100, and it measures food and that raises insulin and blood sugar. Again, to keep this simple, low insulin index is good. Like we learned in the past, right? Low insulin is good. High insulin index is bad. And here's the thing with erythritol. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol that gets absorbed into the bloodstream and then is excreted unchanged through the urine. About 90% of erythritol excreted this way. The remaining 10% travels to the colon. So erythritol can be used as a sugar alternative while we are doing our ketogenic diet. And it tastes about like 70% like sugar. It tastes actually very similar. It has very low GI and insulin index, and it does not cause tooth decay. So you can definitely have erythritol while doing this thing. And overall studies have shown erythritol to be very safe. Long-term feeding of high amounts of erythritol seems to have no serious side effects. But because it is a sugar alcohol, your body may not be able to digest their unique chemical structure and pass unchanged through most of your digestive system. Eating high amounts may cause digestive issues or diarrhea. So erythritol is definitely safe for the ketogenic diet, and it's like a sugar substitute. You can actually use this to make some lovely keto snacks. And it tastes very similar to sugar. But having too much may cause diarrhea, so you need to be careful of that. So I would limit your intake. See how your body takes it first. So try like a tablespoon or two at first before you start going crazy with it, all right? And so how we're going to measure total carbs is we're going to measure total carbs minus erythritol. So limit your carb intake to 20 to 50 grams per day or 5% daily minus erythritol. Just count erythritol as 0, all right? So use erythritol in moderation, and you can use them in keto snacks and desserts, and always check the labels. Because some brands of erythritol come with other chemicals. You really want it to be either pure erythritol or any of the other better sugar alcohols that we're going to cover. Okay, so let's cover the next macronutrient group, protein. So glucose. Our body still needs and still uses glucose. But now our body is using primarily ketones, but we still do need a little bit of glucose for our body to be operational. And so we need glucose in our bodies, even though our body is mainly running on ketones. When you eat carbs, your body is making glucose from the carbs that we eat. But when we stop eating carbs, your body still needs a way to produce glucose somehow. Because without glucose, we will die, right? Our bodies shouldn't drop glucose levels to 0, even on keto, okay? And just like too much glucose can be toxic, too little can also kill you. And some cells in our body can only survive on glucose. So we really actually need glucose inside of our bodies. So these cells, some of these cells run only on glucose, red blood cells, kidney medulla, and our testicles. And they can't metabolize ketones. So gluconeogenesis provides them with enough glucose. So what is gluconeogenesis? The brain also needs glucose. In ketosis, ketones make about 70% of energy, whereas glucose makes about the other 30%. Okay, so the brain uses about 70% fat and 30% glucose. So we introduce a concept, a process known as gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis, or G for short, is the process where your liver converts protein into glucose. That's why the keto diet is high fat and low carb, but also moderate protein. The theory is if we eat too much protein, we will convert the extra protein into glucose, getting our body out of ketosis. So the reason why we are limiting protein is because we don't want to eat too much, which causes the body to convert protein into glucose, thereby kicking us out of ketosis, right? But this is actually becoming a misnomer because more and more studies are showing that protein may not affect gluconeogenesis as much. So new studies have shown that this can be just a myth. Gluconeogenesis, converting glucose from non-carbs, doesn't work at the same rate as carb metabolism, making glucose from carbs. Gluconeogenesis can be a very stable process. So the bottom line is, don't be afraid to be kicked out of ketosis by eating too much protein. But you should still keep your fat intake high. Your fat intake must always be at that 75% mark or higher. For all this to happen, fat consumption must be high. So always have to keep your fat levels high. I can't emphasize that enough because I have made many mistakes in the past of not being high enough fat because I've been so conditioned to not eating fat. Like I felt like a big barrier was between me and eating a lot of fat. Like I really kept thinking to myself, dang, is this okay? Is it safe to eat? Because of those past conditioned beliefs, right? So you really got to let those beliefs go and to really consume those fats and to eat as much fat as possible. So how much protein should we eat? So the average person should have about 0.8 grams per lean body mass, and an athlete should have about 1 to 1.2 grams of lean body mass. And you can go to the calculator down below to calculate your lean body mass. But again, fat percentage must be high, right? You must be in ketosis. It's less about having to worry about protein and more about having that high percentage of fat. All right, so let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about fat and dive deep into this rabbit hole of fat. Okay, fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol are actually building blocks for our hormones. So like I said, we have this conditioned belief that fat is bad for us, but fat is required for our bodies to operate at a normal level. So here's a little picture of fat and cholesterol, right? And hormones are produced by fat cells in humans. And here's a big list of them. Okay, we're not going to cover all of these because there's no reason to cover all of these, and I don't even know how all of these works, to be honest. But we're going to be covering some of the useful ones, some of the more practical ones that we can use on an everyday basis. So again, the calories in, calories out model has developed into a nutrition dinosaur because while calories matter, hormones count more. Food is information, not a math equation. Let me repeat that. Hormones count more. And for our hormones to be operational, we need fat. If you have healthy fats, we have healthy hormones. Okay, let me talk a little bit about bile. Bile is a fluid made by the liver and acts as a storage unit and is needed for metabolizing fat. So it breaks down fat, it absorbs fat, it breaks down toxins to be digested, helps detoxify bad compounds in the body. And consuming fat is a signal for the body to produce more bile. So by eating more healthy fats, you can increase bile production and excrete more toxins. Fat can actually help to excrete more toxins. And this is by the big biohacker Dave Asprey. But too much fat, right, equals obesity. But the thing is, that's if we are in a glucose-dependent state. That's if we are storing fat. But if we are burning fat instead, in ketosis, your body literally becomes a fat-burning entity. It uses fat for fuel. It uses fat for all of those healthy hormones. And even though this program, it's more based on focus and getting stuff done, right? And even though it's not a fat loss program, a healthy side effect that you can expect is that you can lose some fat with this program. In fact, Dave Asprey, I think he said he went on a 4,000 calorie a day diet, but he was getting most of his diet through fat, through ketosis, right? And he said that it was really, really hard for him to gain fat. He was like in the best shape ever without any exercise by consuming 4,000 calories a day and mostly in fat. So gaining fat and gaining weight in ketosis is actually very hard to do because your body is literally burning fat. And even at a resting metabolism, your body is burning fat. So you can expect to lose some fat while in ketosis. All right, let's talk about fat and insulin. We've talked about insulin before. But remember, usually lower insulin and high insulin sensitivity is a good thing for our bodies. Carbs and protein spike insulin levels, okay, which leads to crashes and ultimately weight gain. Fat has the least impact on insulin levels. And I'll give you a little chart to demonstrate this. So carbs can really spike your insulin levels. And protein is the next one. And the fat has the least impact on insulin levels. And so fat also doesn't raise stress hormone cortisol, which increases blood sugar and suppresses your immune system as much as protein or carbohydrates. This again is by Dave Asprey. When body is reliant on a carb-based diet every day, the constant spikes and drops of insulin can be like a roller coaster for your ride. So again, you see that chart, right? And if we are constantly consuming carbs for a source of energy, we are having like these big blood insulin spikes like 3 times a day or even more if we are snacking. And so it can be like a big roller coaster ride, and it's like constantly getting energy and then experiencing a crash, constantly getting energy and then experiencing a crash. And this cycle can really make our bodies feel really drained. Whereas on the other hand, if we are consuming most fat, we don't have as big of those spikes as carbohydrates do. Okay, so fat and cholesterol. People often worry about cholesterol, right? And so this is another thing of social conditioning. This is something that we have been conditioned to believe, that cholesterol is really bad for us. But the thing is, like, your liver automatically creates cholesterol for your body. So we actually need cholesterol, again, for our cells and our hormones. Even if you don't consume cholesterol, your body will still create it. Even if you don't consume cholesterol, your body will still create it. Your body needs it. It builds the outer shell of your cells that make up the bile acids that help digest food. So we need cholesterol. And on any given day, we have between 1,100 and 1,700 milligrams of cholesterol in our body. 25% of that comes from our diet and 75% is produced by the liver. Much of the cholesterol that's found in food can be absorbed by our bodies. And most of the cholesterol in our gut was first synthesized in body cells and ended up in the gut via the liver and gallbladder. The body tightly regulates the amount of cholesterol in the body by controlling internal production. When cholesterol intakes in the diet goes down, the body makes more. When cholesterol intake in the body goes up, the body makes less. So either way, we are producing cholesterol in our bodies. Our body naturally makes about 2,000 milligrams of cholesterol a day. And to give you a little perspective here, egg is about 300 milligrams of cholesterol. And it's also a big building block for your hormones. Brain is made up of cholesterol. Cell walls are made up of cholesterol. And cholesterol is also needed to make vitamin D. So all in all, cholesterol is really good for you. And here's a little chart of how cholesterol kind of works. But let's dive a little bit deeper now, okay? So there's a little thing called HDL cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, high density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein. And look at the terminology here. It is a lipoprotein. It is a protein. It is not even cholesterol. Okay, so really got to deviate from the notion that cholesterol is bad for us. So let's talk about HDL and LDL. HDL is usually labeled as good cholesterol, and LDL is labeled as usually bad cholesterol. But we need both of them. We need LDL for our cells and hormones. And HDL gets excess cholesterol and brings it back to the liver. And so HDL is considered good because it is picking up the old cholesterol that's lying around and it's recycling it. But we also need both. LDL is only bad when it's oxidized. Free radicals plus LDL is bad. But LDL by itself is not bad at all. And so this was a study done on a group that ate low carb diets, right? And everything in this group in terms of health really improved. Their weight went down. They had tremendously lower levels of triglycerides. Their good cholesterol, HDL, remember that's the good cholesterol, and I'm air quoting good here, went up. But then it seems like the LDL, quote unquote, the bad cholesterol also went up. And so there was a study that observed 136,000 patients admitted to the hospital for coronary artery event. And they looked at the LDL cholesterol, right? And so here's the chart of that study. And what they found out was that 41.5% of the patients had LDL-C, which was under 100 milligrams per deciliter. And 12.5% of the patients had LDL-C, which was under 70 milligrams per deciliter. 54% of the patients had what is considered low cholesterol, low LDL cholesterol. So even though they had these low LDL cholesterol, they were admitted to the hospital with a coronary artery event. So it's not really connecting the dots here, right? So LDL isn't the culprit of these coronary heart diseases. So there are actually two different types of LDL, and we're getting more and more science to come out on this research. So there's a small, dense type of the LDL cholesterol and a larger, fluffy LDL cholesterol. The small and dense LDL cholesterol, because of its small size, can penetrate the artery wall more easily. The larger LDL don't penetrate the arterial wall as easily. So it's showing that the small LDL are more easily oxidized, causing bad shit to happen in our bodies, right? But the research shows that getting saturated fat like butter can actually change the small LDL into the healthier, larger LDL. So it's saying that the small LDL are bad, the larger LDLs are good. And eating saturated fat like butter can actually convert the small LDL into larger LDL. And research also shows that the smaller LDL can be increased by eating sugars and carbs like bread and soda. So stay away from those foods. And so all in all, we need both of these HDL and LDL. And LDL is only bad when it's oxidized. And it's usually the smaller ones that are bad. So free radicals plus the smaller LDLs is bad. So it's not LDL cholesterol that's causing heart disease, it's the oxidation of the smaller LDLs, which pretty much leads to inflammation and clotting factors, which pretty much, again, points to sugar and not fat. So really fat isn't to blame. It's more pointing towards sugar, which is the real culprit. Okay, so here's another big question that we get a lot in the keto community. Does saturated fat cause heart disease? So there were 21 studies involving over 340,000 participants, and the conclusion shows that the epidemiologic, goddamn, I cannot say these words, all right. Studies show that there is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with an increased risk of coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disease. And there are even more studies with even more participants, over 600,000 participants in this one, which shows no correlation between saturated fat and heart disease. I really hope that these research really put to rest that idea that fat and cholesterol is bad for us. It is actually required for our bodies, all right? And it is actually really healthy for us, especially in ketosis, okay? All right, and ketone bodies, BHB, is a suppressor of inflammation. Ketosis stabilizes inflammation. And if you want to learn more about cholesterol and fat, here are some videos that you can check out. And I actually covered most of the information here. So this is only if you want to be an overachiever, if you really want more information. Okay, so let's look at fat under the microscope, right? And here's a little picture of fat under the microscope, but let's talk about the length of the fat, and let's also talk about the stability of the fat. So first take a look at the length of the fat. So if you look at the length of the fat molecule, here's a general rule of thumb. The shorter the fat molecule, the more anti-inflammatory it is. So that's why short to medium chain fats such as MCTs can be good for us. So here's an example. Butyrate or butyric acid found in grass-fed butter has a shorter form of fat, and also medium chain triglycerides found in coconut oil or MCT oil. And let's look at the stability of fat. And so not all fats are the same. Let's talk about saturated fat, unsaturated fats, and trans fats. So oxygen is vital for life, right? And this is bringing the concept of oxidization now. We're looking into oxidization. But oxygen for cells can be pretty destructive. Oxygen in cells create oxidative stress or oxidation. Bad shit happens when stuff are oxidized inside our bodies. So free radicals, aka unstable molecules, start to occur. We get cell damage, cancer cells, inflammation, and a lot more bad shit. Okay, and I'm sure we have all heard of antioxidants, right? Well, antioxidants is pretty much anti-oxidation, and it's pretty much combating these issues. It's kind of like, I'll give you an example. When iron reacts with oxygen, it creates rust. That's kind of what happens inside our bodies. If things get oxidized, it kind of slowly starts to turn into rust. And oxidization can be very damaging for fats. And so the most stable types of fats inside our bodies is saturated fats. They have fewer kinks for where oxygen can damage them, and they are single bonded and straight. So here's a little chart of how saturated fat looks. Okay, so unsaturated fats. There are two different types: monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And the second most stable fat is monounsaturated fats, mono meaning one, okay? And there is only one place where oxygen can enter it and damage it. So I'll give you a picture here. So this is a double bond. And through this double bond is a little area where oxygen can enter and damage it. Whereas compared to saturated fat, it has no double bonds. So it has no place where oxygen can enter and damage the cell or damage the fat. And this place, or this type of fat, monounsaturated fat, has one double bond in its molecule. Okay, so it's like a little kink for oxygen to enter. So double bonds are vulnerable to attack by free radicals. It leads to oxidation and bad shit. So polyunsaturated fats, and poly means multiple double bonds. So multiples of unsaturation, multiples of bad shit. So we get multiples of these double bonds where these free radicals can enter and oxidize. And let's talk about trans fat. Trans fat have double bonds, and trans fats also lower levels of HDL while increasing LDL. And the body can actually metabolize trans fats. It's not found in nature. Actually, there are some, but then those are more of the healthier trans fat. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the body can't metabolize them. They're not found in nature, and the body doesn't have the necessary enzymes to catabolize them. And so here is a little picture, a little comparison between unsaturated fat and saturated fat. And as you can see, trans double bond, it's a little different from the unsaturated fat bond. And so there is a certain trans fat that is good for our bodies, and it is known as the conjugated linoleic acid, CLA. But for the most part, trans fat is usually bad unless it's the CLA type. So stay away from trans fat. Okay, stability of fat. So in order from stable to least stable is saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, and trans fat. This can be why our body actually uses saturated fats instead of all the other fats to create cell layers and hormones. So as you have probably heard from the media, saturated fat is bad for us. Well, that's not quite the whole picture, right? So we actually need saturated fat for our bodies to work. But all fats, by the way, contain some of each. No fat is purely saturated or unsaturated. Everything that we eat contains some unsaturated fat, contains some saturated fat. And all unsaturated fats are not bad, by the way. We need some of each, except for maybe the exception of trans fat. So let's talk about omega-3 and omega-6. They have different molecule structures and do different things to our bodies, but we actually need both. And so there are many non-duality principles that goes on inside our bodies. We really need a little bit of both of some of the quote-unquote bad types of fats and some of the good types of fats. Okay, so let's talk about omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-3 and omega-6 have different molecular structures and do different things to our bodies, but we actually need both. You can kind of see like the reoccurring non-duality principle that goes on inside our bodies. So omega-3 and omega-6, these are considered essential fats because our bodies can't produce them. We need them to get from our diets. We need them from our foods. Omega-9, on the other hand, aren't essential because our bodies can produce them. The problem is that nowadays we have too much omega-6 compared to omega-3 because of processed foods and processed oils. And omega-6 can cause inflammation, and omega-3 can be sort of an anti-inflammatory type of fat. Hey, omega-3s have anti-inflammatory properties, and the most common omega-3s, and you've probably heard of this. And so the omega-3s are ALA, EPA, and DHA. And I am sorry, I'm not going to try to pronounce these long words, all right? So ALA, EPA, and DHA, these are the primary omega-3s. Okay, ALA is the most common, but not biologically active until converted into EPA or DHA. And only a small percentage, less than 10%, converts into EPA and even less into DHA. It's simply used as energy when it's not converted. So ALA, you can see, is the lowest type of omega-3. And so EPA helps reduce inflammation. It supports immune system and the heart. And these are found in seafood, fatty fish such as salmon, sardines, and shrimp. But the top of the omega-3 pyramid is DHA. It's probably the most important for the brain and the heart. It's vital for brain development in childhood. Structural component for the skin, eyes, and absolutely the brain. Decreased DHA is linked to impaired brain function. But the thing is, it's the hardest and most expensive to find. You can find them in seafood, fatty fish, algae, and some grass-fed products. And algae contains DHA, so here's how the chain works for these fatty acids. So algae contains DHA, right? And then small fish eat the algae, and they get some of that DHA from their algae. And then bigger fish eat the smaller fish, so that they get some more of those DHAs from the smaller fish that they consume. And then the cycle goes on, right? A bigger fish comes along and it's the smaller fish. So the bigger the fish becomes, the less DHA they have, because it's just getting more and more diluted as they go down that food chain, the food pyramid. So usually the smaller fish have more of the DHA. And so omega-6s. Okay, omega-6s are also essential. And the most common is linoleic acid. So the thing is, we have too much omega-6 in our diets nowadays. So what is the right omega-6 to omega-3 ratio? And this is by Dr. Stephen Guyenet. And he says that pre-industrial range, we range from about 4:1 or even 1:4. And so omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in hunter-gatherers were about 2:1 or about a 4:1 ratio. And even in the Inuits, the Arctic people who live in cold weathers, they have an even higher ratio. Omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in the Inuit is 1:4, and they mostly ate omega-3 rich type of seafoods. But what is it today? The omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is about 16:1. It's actually, I think some researches show that it is higher than this. So some can be even 20 or higher to 1. And here are sources of omega-6 and omega-3. So here's like a little big list here of the omega-6 to omega-3 ratios. And as you can see, some of the processed oils contain the most omega-6s. And so some sources of omega-3, the good fats, are salmon. They contain a lot of EPA and DHA, mackerel, sardines, which are one of my favorites, anchovies, chia seeds, walnuts, and flaxseed. But then the seeds By the way, they contain mostly ALA, which again, it becomes diluted, right? So we really want to aim for more of the EPA or the DHA. So vegetable oil. These are processed seed and vegetable oils, usually containing tons of omega-6s. So it all started with cottonseed oil over about 100 years ago. And they made this type of vegetable oil because it was known for its great shelf life. And companies, food companies, really like these processed oils because they can last so long on the shelves of supermarkets. So they can make a lot of these at a time and they can make a lot of profit on these. But as evolution shows, our bodies didn't really have time to adapt to these weird processed vegetable oils. But then our consumption of vegetable oils has skyrocketed over the years. I mean, take a look at soybean oil and canola oil and peanut oil and all these other seed and nut oils. And this is a chart of soybean oil has increased dramatically over the years, which also contributed to more obesity and also more omega-6s, right? So it's really lopsiding the ratio of omega-3 to our omega-6 in our diets. And here's a chart of vegetable oils. And you can see that it is a huge uptrend of people consuming vegetable oils. And then here's a chart of obesity. Can you quite make a correlation between the two? I mean, they seem pretty damn correlated to me, all right? Okay, so here are some fats and oils to avoid within the diet. So again, all fats and oils are not the same, right? There are some bad fats and there are some oils to avoid. So here's a big list of some of these. I'm not going to go down the whole list, but you can check these out for yourself. And please don't heat these oils, by the way, because they oxidize in heat. And please don't heat the good oils either. So try not to heat your olive oils because they can also oxidize in heat. Try to eat your olive oil as pure as possible without heating it. Okay, so we mentioned that saturated fat is really good for us, right? But it's not like you can start eating all the saturated fat in the world and then all of a sudden you become really super healthy, right? So your best bet is a high-fat, low-carb diet, aka keto diet. Okay, it's all leading to ketosis. This is all leading to ketosis. All right, so we've covered all of the macronutrients. And so I hope this has given you a great insight into these different types of macronutrients and what is bad for us and what is good for us. And I hope you got the overall picture anyways of how this whole thing works. All right, let's move on to the next session, which is ketones. And let's talk about this. Ketones. Fat is converted by the liver into ketones, as I have explained many times. So ketones versus glucose. Ketones are more energy efficient than glucose. So there was a study where rats on keto diets did better on both physical and cognitive tests than rats on a low-fat, high-carb diet. Rats on the ketone diet ran 32% further on treadmills than did the control rats. Ketone-fed rats completed an 8-arm radial maze test 38% faster than those on other diets, making more correct decisions before making a mistake. And some ultra marathon Ironman types of people have also credited ketosis for their high performance in these types of events. An example would be Ben Greenfield. He really advocates ketosis and eating large amounts of fat, and he is like a superhuman being, right? He runs these ultra marathons all the time. So ketone bodies are the most energy efficient fuel and yield more ATP per mole of substrate than pyruvate and increase the free energy released from ATP hydrolysis. Studies show that some neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and epilepsy, which have a hard time using glucose for its cognitive function, see great improvements when switching to ketones. Like I said, ketones can be hugely beneficial for the mind and anything that's related to the brain. And also, Tim Ferriss, which I'm a big fan of his writing and his books and his ideas, he actually credits the ketogenic diet for curing his Lyme disease. He said that after he was diagnosed with Lyme disease, he used the ketogenic diet, and when he went on the ketogenic diet, it seemed to have alleviated most of his mental cognition problems that he had when he was on Lyme disease. So it is truly tremendous for the brain. And ketones get to the brain faster than glucose. Glucose has to wait for the body to convert it into usable forms, and then it has to circumnavigate through the rest of the body. It has to take the long way around instead of the shortcut. And ketone bodies seem to be used as soon as your body produces them. There's no waiting, there's no inefficiencies, no afternoon crashes, especially BHB. So the blood-brain barrier. So our brain has a protective barrier known as a blood-brain barrier. Its main purpose is to protect the brain from toxins and the like. And one of the off-limit compounds is glucose. So glucose cannot penetrate the blood-brain barrier. But studies show that some ketones bodies, such as BHB, beta-hydroxybutyrate, seem to be able to bypass the blood-brain barrier. Thereby, it's giving energy straight to the brain, straight to the source, injecting power straight to the source. Small ketones can readily pass through this barrier, blood-brain, and are then shuttled into your brain tissue using special transporters. You already have some of these transporters, but you will make more as glucose levels drop and ketones levels rise. Your brain's metabolic flexibility will gradually improve until it can harness 60 to 70% of its fat for fuel. And this is by Dr. Joseph Mercola, Fat for Fuel, which is an amazing, incredible book. And he's actually a big pioneer of ketosis, because I think it was Dr. Joseph Mercola that actually influenced Dave Asprey. And a lot of people know Dave Asprey as, like the big leading pioneer of biohacking. So Dr. Joseph Mercola is somebody I also highly respect as well. So ketones, it actually skip steps. They take shortcuts, getting energy straight to the brain instead of the long way like glucose does. It's a faster, more efficient source of energy. I hope I am convincing you that ketosis is really good for the brain. All right, ketones and oxygen. So Dr. Dominic Agostino, who is also a tremendous pioneer in this field and somebody who I really, really respect, he did research which was funded by the Office of Navy Research, and it was aimed at improving Navy SEAL divers' diving capabilities. And so here is Dr. Dom, and he wanted to figure out how to improve these divers' breath-holding capabilities. And he was able to witness that being in a state of ketosis, Dr. Dominic Agostino was able to double his breath hold times from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. And if you've seen the presentation, I had a personal experience where I was able to double my breath hold time as well. I went from like a minute of breath hold time when I was in keto, or when I was in a glucose dependent state, and then I got myself into ketosis and I was able to nearly double my breath hold times to 1 minute and 58 seconds while being in keto. So it's a very energy efficient form of state. And ketones are essentially a super fuel for the brain, that your brain cells can generate more energy from ketones in a more efficient manner than glucose. Ketosis and the skin. So here is another great side benefit of ketosis. Ketosis helps regulate hormone balance and can cause better skin. So for me personally, when I'm in ketosis, my skin feels super soft, all right? So I'll give you an example. So what your skin feels like, even right now, my skin feels extremely soft, but what your skin feels like is, it's like you kind of went to like a skincare clinic, and then you got like their most expensive package, and they gave you like a facial, they did all these masks, and they put all these lotion onto your skin. And it feels like coming out of that skincare place and just having like this rejuvenation of your skin. And it feels really, really soft when you go through that process, right? So that's how it feels like all the time when I'm in ketosis. And it's not just on the face either, it's for your entire body. So my acne has cleared up when I'm in ketosis. And I also had some body acne, right? So I also had some back acne. That cleared up as well. And so it's not just the face, it's the entire body that feels really soft. And I think it can really help people who have skin problems. If you are in a deep state of ketosis, it really can help clear up that acne and some of your skin problems. So this is a big side effect, and it's a side effect that a lot of people have seemed to experience as well. And it really comes down to regulating the hormone balance of the body. And so I think if people have some skin problems or like acne that you want to get rid of, I think I would try out the ketogenic diet, because again, it's about seeking prevention instead of seeking treatment, right? And if you balance out your hormones through diet, remember food is information, then you are addressing the root causes of the skin problems instead of just applying like a lotion or like a mask on top of the acne or the skin problem. You are addressing the root causes of it. So you are seeking prevention instead of seeking treatment, which is way better for the long term. Okay, so if we want to talk about the mind and the brain, we also have to talk about the gut, because science is showing that the gut is like the second brain. So we have to talk about the gut microbiome. We're discovering more and more that the gut, our digestive system, is more like a second brain. Seems like the gut has a mind of its own. Okay, it's like crazy. It's like it has its brain of its own. And it seems to be directly communicating with the brain. The immune system in the gut makes up 60% of our total immune system. The only organ in the body besides the brain to have its own nervous system is the gut. And the gut has to be completely in balance for your brain to be in balance. The brain experiences everything that happens in your gut directly through nervous system feedback, immune activity, cytokines, and other assorted mischievous molecules made in our gut. And this is Dr. Mark Hyman. 95% of our body's happy mood chemicals, such as serotonin, is actually made by our gut. So if you have a healthy gut, we can have more happiness in our lives. And every class of neurotransmitters found in our brain is also found in our guts. The gut and the brain work together in a symbiotic relationship, kind of like two different businesses that kind of rely on each other, but then they're also independent of each other, such as, like, for example, Apple and Samsung. Apple produces their own phones and their own operating system for the phones, iOS, and then Samsung supplies the physical, like glasses and the internals for the phones. So it's like a symbiotic relationship. They rely on each other, but then they're also independent of each other as well. And so one cannot go without the other. It's a interdependent type of relationship. And there was actually a study on mice that shows that if you put microbiota from lean mice into other mice, it protects them from gaining any weight. So they did what was known as a fecal transplant, which pretty much means taking the excretion, taking the shit pretty much of a lean mice, and then you transport that into a obese mice. It actually prevented the obese mice from gaining any weight. And so there were other studies done on mice, on like the personalities of mice. So this can get really crazy, right? So they took the fecal matter of the social and outgoing mice, and then they transported that into these anxious and nervous mice. And what they found out is when they switched the microbiota of the two groups of mice, the anxious group of mice, they got more social and adventurous, and the social mice got more introverted. Your gut bacteria has an influence on your personality. This is pretty crazy, right? So there was another study done on a marathon runner, and this marathon runner, she contracted some kind of disease, and so she needed some kind of a fecal transplant from somebody. And as it turns out, the perfect person to have this fecal transplant was, I think it was her cousin or niece or somebody related, right? And so they went through with the fecal transplant. And so this marathon runner got the fecal from her niece into our own body, into our own gut. But the thing is, like a few months later, this marathon runner all of a sudden gained a lot of weight. She started to soon become obese. But the thing is, her niece was a very overweight and obese person. And so like these personalities of these people can be transferred just by changing their gut bacteria. Just by having a fecal transplant from an obese person into a normal person, into a quite healthy person, right? She was a marathon runner. It can actually change your personality and your genes to be expressed in a way where you all of a sudden start to become more and more obese. So this is how powerful our gut bacteria and our gut microbiome can be. Seriously, it's like our second brain. It can actually change our personalities. So it seems like our gut speaks to your brain. It triggers an immune and nervous system response that sends messages back to the brain, which lead to insomnia, sickness behavior, anxiety, depression, and impaired cognitive function. The gut immune system speaks to the brain, sending messages of inflammation, which increases levels of CRF in the hypothalamus, which in turn increases stress hormones like cortisol and changes neurotransmitter levels. And there are so many stories and examples of strong correlation between gut and the brain. If you want to really learn more, you can check out Mark Hyman's book, The Ultramind Solution. And he outlines everything that is related with the mind and the body, the mind-body connection, right? If you want to fix your mind, you got to fix your body. And so he quotes like an autistic boy I treated actually began to speak after changing his diet and eliminating gluten and dairy, which altered the information that went into his gut. These remarkable stories are all evidence of the intimate connection between your gut and your brain. In one study, 207 patients with severe violent behavior disorders were treated with a comprehensive metabolic and biochemical systems approach. They were tested, and their problems with methylation, blood sugar, nutrition deficiencies, and gut problems were all corrected. 76% of the group actually followed the program. More than 90% of the participants significantly reduced violent behavior, and 54% had total elimination of their severe behavior problems. And here's another one. In a study of 148 children with autism compared to 30 normal controls, children without autism, 90% of autistic children showed inflamed bowels on biopsy compared to only 30% of controls. And this is like drawing a connection between autism and like the gut bacteria, right? This makes me wonder if many non-autistic children have bowel inflammation from poor diet and allergies as well. And Dr. Mark Pimentel talks about seeing common symptoms like brain fog and fatigue in patients with irritable bowel syndrome that clear up when the toxic bacteria are cleared up using the treatment he created. A bloated belly leads to a bloated brain. The symptoms can vary from OCD to depression to anxiety to autism or even psychosis. So there is a huge correlation between the mind and the body. And if you want to learn more about this, here are some videos that you can watch. But again, I'm showing you a lot of the information that goes on in these videos. And so here are also some more books if you are an overachiever and want more research to learn about this. So there is Brain Maker, and there's also Ultramind Solution. Overall, if you want a better and more focused brain, give your gut good stuff, and it will send good signals to your brain. We have to address the brain through ketos, and we also have to address our gut microbiome as well. So let's talk about gut microbiome. Let's talk about the bad bacteria versus the good bacteria inside our guts. So bad bacteria that create bad microbiomes: gluten, sugar, yeast, antibiotics. And antibiotics is, I guess, it's can be like a neutral thing because it clears out all the bacteria, both good and the bad. But I would stay away from antibiotics. Ammonia, mold, and other toxins. So here are the good bacteria. I'm sure you have heard of probiotics, right? These are healthy bacteria, and they consist in these fermented foods such as kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, kombucha, and miso. But miso also contains soy, so I would try to limit that. And there is a thing known as prebiotics. And these are food for the probiotics. These are food for the good bacteria. These strengthen the probiotics. And these are found in prebiotic fibrous foods such as asparagus, artichoke, seaweed, flaxseed, cacao, onions, and garlic. So with a big change in diet, your gut microbiome can actually go through some big changes at first, which means you can experience diarrhea or constipation, but it normally goes away after the body adapts to the new diet. So even when you are going through ketosis and the ketogenic diet, you might experience some diarrhea and some constipation because your body is completely going through this gut microbiome change. It's a big change that it's going through. And so your body really has to adapt to this new type of diet before it starts to normalize and before you start to get the great benefits of ketosis. Okay, so now that we talked about all the huge benefits of the ketogenic diet, let's talk a little bit about the negative. Let's really try to look at this from an objective point of view. What are some negatives of the ketogenic diet? So there are some negatives associated with the ketogenic diet, and ketosis is definitely not bulletproof. I'm sorry, Dave Asprey. And so there are some negatives to this thing. So let's really try to be transparent and as objective as possible. So for the long term, for many months of low carb keto without a break can cause higher cortisol levels, and extended periods can be stressful to the thyroid. Gut microbiome will need to adapt at first, like we explained, right? It takes some time for the gut microbiome to adapt. And there's a psychological thing where you have all these carbs all around you and your friends are all eating carb-based foods where you're not. And there's also this thing known as keto breath. And keto breath is not necessarily a bad thing. And to me, personally, what my keto breath, it kind of tastes like, I guess, or kind of smells like, but it kind of smells like raspberry. There's like a tint of raspberryness in my breath whenever I'm in deep ketosis. And after a while, this kind of goes away. But initially, you might have like what is known as keto breath. And that's just like the acetone. Remember the breathalyzer, the breath measurements of the ketones? That's the acetone that are just emitting out of your breath. And there's also a thing known as the KetoFlu. This is like a rite of passage for everybody. And everybody has to go through this. I mean, KetoFlu is just one of those inevitable things. And it's going to feel really bad for like the first few days to like the first week or so. But then after you get over this hump, you can see the mental energy and the euphoric feeling that you might be able to get while being in ketosis. And another negative is initial sleeplessness. So if this is your first time in keto, you might be wired all the time, especially at night, especially when trying to go to sleep, because your body is using a more efficient type of energy, and you might be really wired, and it might be harder to sleep, at least initially. After you get adapted, then you can have a lot better, deeper sleep than before even. But initially, you might have some sleeplessness. And so I want to talk about the gut microbiome from a perspective of the carnivore diet. So Jordan Peterson, he's an advocate of the carnivore diet, and his daughter actually credits a lot of the carnivore diet to alleviate some of her, I think she had some joint pains and like a certain disease with her joints. And so her daughter said that she had to go through, I think it was 12 weeks of constant diarrhea, and for this gut microbiome change to take effect. And so she went through many months of constant, digestive issues such as diarrhea. But she said after the 12 weeks, it was all worth it because it really helped treat some of our symptoms. So just know and just be warned that in the beginning, your gut bacteria might need to adapt, especially if you have been eating some really bad foods, right? Like some processed foods all the time, then your gut bacteria needs to go through a big change. And also, although there are some negatives, some people thrive in being in ketosis all the time. Like me, I absolutely feel euphoric when I'm in ketosis. Like I can't go back to the carb-based diet, especially when I need to focus for long periods of time. Whenever I try to focus on a carb-based diet now, God, it's like, oh man, the brain fog comes back. I can't focus, and I start to wonder, how the hell was I able to pass my classes when I was younger in this kind of state? And so it's like a big contrast. Like now I'm so used to being in ketosis, like I might not feel it. But then once I go back to a carb-based diet, once I have like a cheat day or whatever, oh man, I can definitely feel it. My brain, it's really hard for my brain to function in a carb-based diet. And so some people might need a break, and your body does need cycles. So it does need to cycle. You do need some carbs every once in a while. But there are other people like me who really thrive on this state. So again, like I said, for the program, we will implement a modified cyclical keto diet, cycling in and out of ketosis with cheat days where we can eat whatever we want. But for now, we will focus on fat adaptation. I hope I have said this many times to really drill this into your head. We really need to become fat adapted before we start deviating. So after about 6 to 8 months of straight keto, we can start having a little fun. All right, KetoFlu. So ketosis has a rite of passage. It's known as the KetoFlu. It's like a boot camp that we have to go to before we become soldiers of the world. And we have to earn the right to ketosis. It's pretty inevitable that we have to go through this low period. In the first few days or weeks, if you're doing it the slow way, you might experience flu-like symptoms, such as tiredness, laziness, hunger, headaches, or even body aches. And it doesn't really necessarily feel like the flu, because the flu-like symptoms come from electrolyte depletion. But once you get those electrolytes back in, it really helps out a lot. But you will have like this kind of gray zone kind of area where you're not really in ketosis and you're not really carb dependent, and it will feel pretty bad. Like you will have like that lethargic type of feeling. You'll feel down, your brain won't function as well. And at first, you're going to lose a lot of weight very fast, by the way. You're going to lose a lot of water weight, because a lot of carbs hold water, and you're also going to pee a lot. So your body's just letting that go. So along with carb loss, water loss, you're also going to lose electrolytes. So like I said, it's very important to keep yourself hydrated and to supplement with electrolytes. And you're also going to be in the gray zone, right? You're not really using fat for fuel. You're not really using glucose for fuel. And you can definitely alleviate this by taking electrolytes and sodium. Sodium, so the big three: sodium, magnesium, potassium. And so you can take these supplements, or you can take foods that are high in magnesium and potassium, such as spinach or avocado, right? And here are just like some general guidelines for these electrolytes. So potassium, you need about 3,000 to 4,700 milligrams of potassium daily. And potassium can be found in these foods: avocado, spinach, salmon, and usually meats have a lot of potassium. And magnesium, about 400 to 800 milligrams per day. You can find them in foods such as avocados, spinach, mackerel. So you can see that avocado covers a lot of these electrolytes, right? And you can also take supplements, magnesium and potassium. And good bioactive forms of magnesium are citrate, maltate, aspartate, and a few others that I do not want to pronounce at this moment. And taking too much magnesium, by the way, can cause diarrhea. So try to adapt it to your body. And potassium, some good bioactive forms are citrate and potassium bicarbonate. And high dose of potassium is harder to find, and because there's actually a limit for the pills in potassium. I think like the FDA has a limit of like 99 milligrams that you can take in supplement form. But you can also find potassium in other ways, in other foods. So even though you're taking supplements, you will still experience, again, the gut microbiome changes. So you can still temporarily feel like shit. It's just a rite of passage. It happens to everybody, okay? And you might have diarrhea. You might have some digestive issues. So when you're first transitioning, make sure that you don't have a hectic or busy schedule that involves a lot of your energy. And a good way to transition into ketosis is like during a break or during vacation, or at least like a weekend that you can get yourself into a good environment in. And so it's like the storm before the sunshine. It's like a rite of passage. Once you pass the stage, you really get to experience the same type of energy. And it is absolutely worth it. Seriously, it's absolutely worth it. And for me, like I said, it's hard for me to go back to a carb-based diet. I mean, I absolutely do, because I do enjoy carb cycling and cheat days. But then like whenever I have like a big presentation that I have to give, or I have something important that I have to do, then I always do it in ketosis. I either do a long fast to prepare myself for these big types of events that I have to do, or I would implement, like a high-fat diet. So it's absolutely worth it. It's kind of like the climb up the mountain, and then you get to enjoy the peak of the mountain, the peak of ketosis, and the wonderful view that it comes with. All right, so let's talk about ketosis and flow. So can we get into these flow states without ketosis? Can I use the program without being in ketosis? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. And a lot of these flow-based athletes and these high performers, they don't really know about ketosis, right? But they can still tap into flow. So you can get into flow without ketosis. But, here's a big but. But it's kind of like running a marathon with a 30-pound backpack on is the example I like to give. So when you're carb dependent, remember that the example of the truck is kind of like you're pulling a lot of weight. You're trying to run a marathon with like a 30-pound backpack on. It really slows you down. It slows down your mental power. And you definitely can run a marathon this way. You can get from point A to point B. You can focus. You can get stuff done. But it's just a lot harder. But when you're in ketosis, it's like you let go of the backpack. You have so much more freedom. You feel so much lighter. It's like that big burden off of your shoulders. And you get to experience a faster type of energy, a different vehicle for that energy. And you can get things done a lot quicker. Kind of like I said, the truck versus the car example. So you can get into flow without ketosis. But ketosis just makes it a lot easier for you to do. And so here is like a little bit of my personal energy hierarchy. Okay, so for the 80-20 of all of this is in the order of effectiveness, just for me. Okay, this is me personally. But I think ketosis is at the top. Actually, sleep should be at the top, because sleep is just foundational. If you only have 2 hours of sleep, it doesn't matter how high of a ketone level you are, you're just not going to function very well. So sleep is actually very foundational. You need sleep for everything. You need sleep for all of these. And I have a big lesson on sleep coming up. So ketosis is number one for energy, mental power. And then it's exercise. And then it's meditation. And then it's caffeine. And then it's like the other stuff, like the coffee and the other benefits of coffee, such as polyphenols and all of that. So ketosis is pretty much at the top of my energy hierarchy. And it really helps me to stay focused and to get into flow states. All right. Let's turn our minds on in ludicrous mode. So the fastest way into ketosis, which I probably have explained to you already, is prolonged fasting for 48 to 72 hours. So here are a few of your action items. We have 5 in total, okay? And we will dive deeper into this. But number one, we need to order our glucometer and glucose and ketone strips, and we really need a lot of strips for this program. And so we can order the Keto Mojo or the Precision Extra. And here's a little trick. You can go on eBay for the Precision Extra strips. They are a little bit cheaper. And we really need a lot of strips, at least 50 or more of each. So it's like 100 strips in total. And number 2, electrolyte supplements. And number 3, after we receive the glucometer, we're going to do a prolonged fast. Yep, we are going to do a prolonged fast. Remember, that's the fastest way to get into ketosis. And I have also recorded a video on how you can track these ketones using the blood glucometer, so watch that after this. And as you are fasting, while you are fasting, you can also watch the next lessons to order and shop for your keto foods as well. So let's get into each one of these. Action item number 1, order the glucometer and glucose strips. So choose one, Keto Mojo or Precision Extra, a minimum of 30 strips each. I would say 50 strips. Yeah. Really try to aim for 50. If you're tight on budget, try to look for the strips on eBay because they have the cheapest ones for Precision Extra strips. And you also want to watch out for the expiration date because these do have an expiration date. But try to get as much as possible. And I think I would try to get the Keto Mojo over the Precision Extra because it does require less blood than the Precision Extra. So here again is Keto Mojo. You can order these on Amazon or wherever you like. I'll leave links to these down below. And action item number 2 is you want to get some electrolyte supplements if you haven't already from the fasting lesson, because you really need these now for the prolonged fast that you're about to do. And the simplest all-in-ones that you can get is the Pure Planet Sports Salt or Dr. Berg's original electrolyte powder. So I would just recommend the Pure Planet Sports Salts. It's very easy. It comes in pill format and it has all of your electrolytes. It has a ton of potassium, magnesium, and it also has pink Himalayan salt. Or if you want a more flavorful one, you can get the electrolyte powder. This is more expensive, but it also covers a lot of your, or all of your electrolyte needs. And after you receive your glucometer, okay, we're going to do a prolonged fast. This is your rite of passage. So you want to actually measure your levels. Once you get your glucometer, measure your blood glucose and your ketone levels and put these into your health tracker. We want to measure the prior and post to fasting. So you can put that into the health tracker, like you see here. And after you receive your glucometer, after you get those measurements, you want to do a prolonged fast. So here are some tips for the prolonged fast. Okay, first of all, try to do this over a weekend. Try to do this on days where you're not very busy because you are going to experience some of that keto flu. So what we want to do is you want to aim for at least 48 hours. 48 hours to 72 hours, and it differs for everybody. But here's my personal experience. I first tried a 48-hour fast at first, and my ketone levels did not get too high. And however, when I pushed myself to do a 72-hour fast, after the 72-hour period was when I was first able to get into ketosis. I think I had a measurement of like 1.2 on the ketone scale. So it might be different for you, but I at first had to at least do a 72-hour fast. I really had to take it to the extreme because my body just wasn't getting into ketosis, right? So try it out, try it at least for 48 hours and then take your measurements. And if you're not in ketosis yet, then push it to 72 hours or more. Okay, and you also want to do a lot of brisk walking because it actually helps to activate more ketones inside the body. And you want to drink lots of water, okay? You're going to lose a lot of water. You're going to go to the bathroom a lot. And you have to drink at least 2 to 3 liters every day with a lot of salt, with electrolytes, okay? And you want to take a lot of electrolyte supplements. It really helps with the keto flu, once in the morning, once at night, and maybe even more in between. So you want to measure your blood levels before fast, 48 hours fast, 48 hours fast, 24 hours fast, 72 hours fast. And you want to measure, keep measuring. Because in the beginning, especially when you're trying to get keto adapted, it's really important to measure. And action item number 4, watch the how to track ketones video that I recorded for you. You want to watch that. And you can also watch the next lesson, which is on the actual shopping and the food part of the ketogenic diet. And as you're fasting, watch the next lessons on the ketogenic diet, like I said, and be prepared to shop for foods right away. Because right when you come out of your fast, you need to have some foods that you can eat, some high-fat foods that you can eat so you can sustain the ketogenic diet so you can have your body adapted to fat. Okay, and the actual keto diet lesson, again, is the next lesson. But again, fasting is the fastest way into keto. And there is another slow way. You can start right away by implementing a high-fat low carb diet. But starting that way is very slow and arduous, and it's a torturous process because you have to go through with the KetoFlu for a longer period of time, for about 2 to 3 weeks. And I actually tried to get myself into keto. The first way that I actually tried to get myself into keto was through a ketogenic diet right off the bat, right? It wasn't through fasting. And I was never able to get myself into ketosis, even though I tried to implement a high-fat diet for about 2 to 3 weeks, I think, and I was still never able to get myself there. It was only when I started to do a fast, in a prolonged fast, that I was able to get myself into ketosis. So the slow way is the ketogenic diet. And I don't really suggest this way because it not only takes a long time, but keto adaptation takes 6 to 8 weeks, right? But if you add this process, it'll take another 2 to 3 weeks. So you're adding 6 to 8 weeks plus the 2 to 3 weeks to get yourself into keto. So it'll take longer. It'll take 8 to 11 weeks for this whole process. So just bite the bullet and just try a prolonged fast. That is the fastest way to get into keto. And here are some tips. Okay, the night before your keto fast, try to eat a high-fat meal, not a high-carb meal. It just makes it harder for your body to utilize fat. And sparkling water absolutely helps. Sparkling water helps. Tea and coffee helps. Anything with 0 calories. Okay, so coffee can help, tea can help, and sparkling water really suppresses the appetite. And get yourself busy. Like do some projects, work on something. Go for a run, exercise or something. Get your mind off of food. So go out and do something. It really keeps your mind off of food. Okay, so how do you break a long fast, a prolonged fast, right? So again, important part is you want to stay in ketosis. Do not kick yourself out of ketosis. You worked really hard, you've starved for 72 hours. You don't want to waste that effort that you put into. So what you want to do is after a long fast, you want to take something that's high in fat right away. Okay, so you can take MCT oil, you can take coconut oil, you can take butter, but you want to be fat. You want fat to be the first thing that you eat, all right? You want to keep your body to continue to use fat for your fuel. And you can add oils or butter into bone broth. Bone broth actually helps you transition, especially with your gut bacteria, because you might experience diarrhea when coming out of the fast, and bone broth actually helps with that. So you can add oils or butter into your bone broth and to make it as high of a fat of a meal as possible. And make sure you are always tracking your fat percentage. Remember, I showed you how to calculate your fat percentage. Always make sure that it is over 75%. And to help with the stomach, you can take probiotic supplements. So you can take fermented foods such as kimchi and sauerkraut, but always make sure you are eating it with fat, okay? And again, weekends are the best. You might experience KetoFlu even if you are taking the supplement. So the first few days, again, they're gonna feel pretty bad. So get yourself in a comfortable environment and do not try this while you're traveling. That is a very bad thing, I believe. So just do it when you are at home and when you are comfortable. And make it real. Please, please get that blood glucometer because it makes it real. Getting the glucometer makes it real. And if you're not taking it seriously, you're just dabbling, seriously. Because I know so many people who know about the ketogenic diet, who know all the benefits of it, and they still have never done it before. It's like, dude, come on, man. You know that it's really healthy for you. You know that it can explode your focus power. And to make it real, you really want to get the blood glucometer because that means that you have invested, right? Remember, we talked about leverages and pressure, especially financial leverage. And so investing in the blood glucometer is getting yourself leverage so you can take more action. So you don't want to be a dabbler. You want to be a master of the stuff. Be a master of your mind. Be a master of flow. And please be a master of your gift. Please make this into a reality. This is what I really wish for you. I really wish that you can take action on this stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the long run. So don't be discouraged. If you don't feel good right away, it'll take your body a few days to a few weeks to adapt. So please don't be discouraged. I mean, we are all here to help. I'm here to help you. And you have to really see this from the long run. It's going to take your body a few days to a few weeks to adapt. So we are all here to encourage you. So please don't be encouraged if you don't feel it right away, because I made plenty of mistakes in the past. Okay, so I'm just giving you all of my tips, and so that you can avoid my pitfalls. And at first, it's going to seem like you're taking like 10 steps back. It really is, right? If you're going to like the KetoFlu, but we're taking 10 steps back to go 100 steps forward. This is for, again, the long term. We want to see this for the long term. And last but not least, you got this. seriously, it will be worth it in the end. But you've really got to bring it. You really got to take action. Go on that prolonged fast, and you got this. I really believe in you. So please take that action, and maybe on the other side, you can start transforming your life. So that is it for this video. I wish you the best of luck, my friend, and I really believe in you. I hope you can find some transformative processes throughout this experience. So that is it, and go ahead and start doing your action items, and I will see you in the next lesson. Peace.